Okay, let's see here. I'm gonna push that way down till it's barely audible. There we go.
Oh, what are you
Okay.
playing?
Well, I'm not playing anything. This is just a recording in background.
Oh, it's just video. Oh, I love it.
Yeah, well, I was playing some Hexen 2 the other day, or today. I was just playing some Hexen 2, and I was just like, let's just record this and put it up for background, because we're screwing around.
I like it.
Yeah.
Who did the guy who interviewed you? Like, I think I can write or whatever.
Yeah.
He had like Elden.
He had
Ring,
Elden
I guess,
Ring.
going on in the background.
Yeah.
I was so confused. I'm like, how is he talking to you while he's playing this game? It looks super intense. And I'm like 20 minutes in, I go, oh, he just put the audio over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, welcome everybody. This episode we're not playing our usual shadows.
Yeah, sadly,
One
we
of
were
our-
missing some people.
One of our crew is out doing very important IRL grown-up stuff.
And that's fine.
And we were about to start a fight. Like, right, we had just done like
We'd gotten through
initial-
like a round of combat, yeah.
yeah, everyone had taken their initial shots and you know, Bill went probably killed like 9 people, and then, you know, then we paused. So
Yeah.
it makes sense
Well-
to shift for today.
And he's a freaking maniac with that sword of his, and his like he's just so combat centric. It's hilarious.
Yeah. All right. So we were talking offline before the stream started about the vastness of Night City.
Yeah, it's big on a scale that might actually be a little bit incomprehensible, because the amount of like square mileage plus, you know, like there's going to be open
Yeah.
gaps. There's going to be serious open gaps where, you know, I didn't think there would be any, but the population density is going to be pretty high. But there's going to be definitely holes where, you know, either that be for like landfills or areas that are going to be used for utilitarian purposes only. You know, that...
Or like we were talking, you know, Appalachian Mountain Range.
Yeah.
Like the city's going to encroach, but it's not going to be Mate building up over the peaks with just
Nope.
a little visible crest.
Yeah, no, not that. Plus all the different supernatural crazy business of cryptids and things like that going on in there. We're gonna play that one into it because I totally forgot that that was a thing and where the Appalachians were. Because whenever I hear about it, I keep thinking it's like, oh, isn't that like the Midwest? I keep forgetting that it's actually really far east.
Yeah, I mean it goes from like basically Maine to Alabama or whatever, right? Like it's.
Yeah.
And I was looking up a map of it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is basically the western border of Night City, which could actually be like a pretty cool natural border.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that, 100%. Yeah.
You know, if it just kind of like ended there, and then that was like the Badlands, that was technically inside the city limits, but not really. So yeah. So when we're talking scale of Night City. We've been calling it a megalopolis.
Because that's what it is.
Right? It's a 1,500 miles, roughly, as the plane flies, from Maine to Florida. And it comprises of all of those states. So, like Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, D.C., like all of that. It doesn't touch Ohio or Tennessee or anything like that, and it goes all the way down till we get Alabama, and then Florida, Georgia, all that. So, New York is still like the most densely populated area.
Yeah. Well, structurally speaking, because I know for a fact that whole space for the, you know, like where New York sits and a lot of the actual or like earthy foundations, all of that is pretty much solid bedrock. So
yeah,
being able to put up larger structures and have them hold would make perfect sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Not Not like some of the buildings out here, West Coast, where you're dealing with fault lines and things like that.
Yeah, you're right.
Um, so you were talking how, like, because I was kind of grilling you about this earlier, how Night City's divided up into territories,
Hmm.
and this is really cool because in our last session, I think at the very end of the one before that, and then at the beginning of our last session last week, we flew from the Central City territory, where
Hmm.
we've been based most of the time, to the Daedalus Belt territory, which is adjacent. And so
Yeah.
Central City is, New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts area, and then the Daedalus Belt is what? West Virginia, Virginia, D.C., New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware.
Yeah, I'm not
Right? Like
terribly familiar with the states are. I just know the border, but yeah, it
I'm
sits
like
like
I'm
literally
looking at the
right.
map, trying. This
Yeah.
one's a hat. This one's a little wiggle thing over here, like all that. But basically, like New Jersey, and then the DMV, the Delaware, Maryland, Virginia zone,
Yeah.
DC, right there. So they're buddies. So it's still a couple hours of flight time, but we're in a new area. And one of the cool things that you were talking about is how the Daedalus Belt is like transportation junction central, right?
Yeah. Well, it's not just one big solid like transportation hub, but it's got massive big intersections laced all throughout it because it has to be the centralized point where a lot of this stuff goes through because you're taking that 1500 and turning it into 750, and so that it can only it doesn't
Right.
have to travel as hard one way or the other.
Yeah. Well, and what I like is that, so we have the very top is the North Quarter, right?
Mm-hmm.
The northernmost spot. Then Central City, which is not a city, right? But Central City
Yeah, it's
is
referred to as
like
the Central City
York
Hub.
and
Yeah.
Kansas, right? And then below that, Daedalus Belt, and then next we have the Welterworth Commons, which is the um, North Carolina and Virginia, I want to say. And then next one down, South Carolina, is the Greenwald District, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then Southside Consortium, Georgia, Alabama, Florida. So, each of these territories is vast, multiple, what's currently U.S. states. And then those states are called sectors, right? So we have like the New York sector, the Maine sector, stuff
Yeah.
like that. You said your hierarchy goes like territory, then sector, then zone,
Yeah.
district, neighborhood. So
Yeah.
like, we've been in the New York area and the metro area, right, this whole time we've been
Mm-hmm.
playing.
Yeah.
Danny's likely never ventured, right? Danny Blaze, 15-year-old kid, maybe has never ventured outside of this. Who knows? There could have been a school trip that went down to Florida or something, but for the most part, right, he's been staying there.
Yeah.
Um, which is really cool though that this sets it up for like our game is set in this area, but somebody else could run an entire game that's based out of the Gulf Coast, right? Like
Right.
they could have their entire epic cyberpunk supernatural whatever dealing in Florida, Georgia, Alabama area. That's like its own total thing, has its own people, its own criminals, its own corporations, like all
Yeah.
that.
Yep. We were working on. We were kind of like tossing ideas around it. What was it? Sun Coast, Sun City Coast, or yours? Because it was a.
Yeah, yeah. I like the idea of these zones that are kind of like they naturally align with like major metropolitan areas, right?
Yeah.
So down in Florida, the big major metros are Orlando and then the Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg area. So
Yeah.
like Orlando could be, Space Coast, and then Tampa, St. Petersburg, Suncoast City, right? They've each got their own industries and all that. So we were talking about, me running a, game, and I would have that be in Suncoast City. Totally different flavor from the New York stuff. It's going to be more tourism and, hot summer. Not that New York doesn't have hot summers, but like that more Floridian humidity
Yeah.
and in their
Well,
own industry, right? Maybe they're more biotech, or maybe
there's
they're more
that, and plus
environmental.
the city structures won't be as tall. They're
Right.
not going to be as
Yeah, it's
high up.
swampland.
Yeah, it's swampland plus hurricanes. I actually got to listen to somebody who was from there, and he was talking about the fact that he's been through so many different like various category hurricanes, and the thing about that is that he was talking about how the building structures operate and how they work. He was like, it is it's requirement now that you have to have these windows that can withstand hurricane winds specifically, along with the debris that they can throw. He's like it's triple pane, high high intensity glass where they actually use shotguns to test it out to make sure it doesn't break, and they're all laminated like safety glass.
Right, right, right.
So when they break, they don't just shatter inward and create a whole bunch of shards. They actually are held together with laminate. So it's
I love that, you know, still the future, but what does the 50 years from now version of that look like, you know? Do we have buildings that like what is it? Brandon Sanderson's series, right? Where the wind always comes through like in that one direction
yeah,
every single time. Like, so do we have buildings there that shift,
probably.
you know, go into
Um,
hurricane mode?
yeah, I would act. Well, there'd probably be some very specific testing and things that would go along with it.
We were talking geography of Night City.
Oh yeah, I love the fact that you're expanding the Appalachian territories into that kind of, you know, Central Park isn't the only true nature spot where supernatural stuff can go down. It's actually a larger swath, right?
Yeah. I wanted
And
to see.
I like that quite a bit.
So the Appalachian Mountains. Oh no, they go basically right through the middle of Night City, of the states in Night City.
Even better.
So just gotta. So they end in like central Alabama, at its um, southwesternmost point. Is at the end of is at the center of Alabama, right? So that's at the bottom of Night City, and then they go up all the way through in that same northeastern path, basically, um, right up through Vermont, New Hampshire, into Maine. So, yeah, they cut right through the southeastern corner of New York. They cut diagonally right across Pennsylvania, right down through the Virginias. So it would be so easy to say that there's some natural issues going on supernaturally in those states.
It's almost too easy. Um, it's fantastic, actually. I'm super jazzed that we came across that, and I went right. I totally gapped what was going on with that. Jesus.
Yeah. Oh, that's so we were talking about how in the chat we were talking about how like ley lines, right? Natural
Yeah.
power structures and stuff like that. Of course, Night City is going to be aligned along that direction because there are natural and supernatural forces at work with ley lines going right along,
Yeah.
you know, the mountains there. And, you know, maybe there are some zones in the territories that are more skewed in that direction. Like I had the Iron Mountain zone.
Well,
in the
you can
North
do
River.
it. You can do it where it's like you have fortified towns
Yeah.
that live in there, like
Yeah.
well, it's like, well, I mean, coal mining's still there, but they have to have a fortified town because the supernatural really doesn't like them plundering the land, and corporations fund these super fortresses in the middle of the Appalachians that are more heavily armored and protected than most, areas within highly dense human populations,
Yeah.
because they're literally at war with the supernatural. I
Well,
mean,
and you can
do that.
yeah, just dig in. You'll get folks who are just dug into the side of the mountains. Like if you think we have preppers now, wait until they see their first werewolf, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I like the concept of having like hillbilly havens that are fortified, and then I like the concept of corporate super fortresses as they harvest resources.
Yeah.
And then you have the conflict between the supernatural and those corporate fortresses, and then you have the conflict between the fortresses and hillbilly havens, because we don't want no government interference in our lands, that kind of attitude. And then you've got this kind of three-way battling going on between the elements, and that's why no side can take advantage, because there you go. Like some of the best hunters in Night City come from hillbilly havens. Some of the best troopers who deal with supernatural for these corporations come from these super fortresses. Right?
I'm there with you.
So it kind of it then expands from that concept into not only potential character development, but into the lore of those corporations, and where do they get their elite soldiers to deal with the supernatural? Well, they go to the farm team. They farm them out of the super fortresses, right? Where does Hunter.net get its greatest hunters?
Well, that's one that I love.
Great idea. Great idea. Moonshine City.
I'm there.
Okay. But I know that's just me spitballing some ideas.
Well, that would all make perfect sense to me. Plus, the other element to it is that there are stories and character backgrounds that I didn't even think could correlate too terribly well with the way that would function. And now I've got a placement for where they showed up. Speaking of hillbilly havens, I've got a character that's from way back when, who's literally he's going to be part of the supplemental races called Beastkin, but he's like really more bestial than human. He's actually human bat combination, and so, but he's sort of like, I don't remember his name, but he's got the southern accent. He wears the overalls, no shirt. He runs with the
Ezekiel from Dresden Files.
Well, but I mean, he runs with a Winchester lever action and like feather trigger. Like that's his preferred weapon. But he's bat, so his ears are big and long and they're elongated. He can't see shit, so he wears big old goggles that are like super nearsighted, so his eyes look huge. But he's wearing the goggles all the time because he can't wear glasses that are not industrial enough. They'll just fall off. But he's actually got wings, and it stops here, where like the normal bat wing would stop, but that's the reason why he wears overalls, because the actual wing and the flesh and the rest of it couldn't work without that. So he always looks like he's wearing like a long coat in a way.
Yeah. So question, what does that mean for the territories outside of, what is the condition of the territories outside of the Night City? Like,
what do you mean,
Midwest?
like the Midwest? I mean, like most everything else has been fairly well drained. Population density is going to be so high in the Night City area that you're talking like it's pretty much like everything just kind of like drained from out of the rest of the United States and into Night City. So massive agricultural areas, because we're so condensed as a population in that eastern seaboard location. Everything else has been turned into much smaller towns, a lot more agricultural fielding all across the board.
So, in the agricultural fielding, would you say that it's more of an automated system for agriculture?
Oh, there's probably going to be a sophisticated amount of robotics involved, yeah.
Okay.
It's not going to be entirely robotic, because human beings are much better than robots at gauging these kinds of things. They have an instinct where robots don't. But, I mean, it would be cooperative. It'd be a cooperative setup for that.
All right, I just sent you guys. Oh, could I post it in here? I didn't even think about doing something in Twitch. Let's see. Oh, I can. Hey, that's cool.
Well, I can see it in. It didn't show up in Twitch. Sorry.
No. I meant in Skype. I forget.
Yes.
that Twitch is a thing. But anyway, so I'm like on Twitch. Don't forget. So
we're Inception again.
yeah. So just I just did a kind of like topographical map of the U.S. And so the way Night City aligns is like that kind of western border.
Wow. Now that cuts like right across that western part. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Central Park represents the gateway to the Feylands, and then the Appalachians then becomes just the extension of a supernatural haven.
Well, the thing about this is like all of that makes perfect sense, because if you recall, the Unseen Court has become much more involved with humanity because of the fact that they have grown to such power and they're starting to eat up territory. Guess what the Appalachian Mountains really are? That's their stomping grounds. That's why we hear so much about like cryptids and all kinds of other weird crap coming from out of there all the time. Those are access points. That's their transit hub, and we basically went right up against it. And so they're like, well, this is getting interesting. They're starting to come in real close. We can't have them going too far. So now the interaction with humanity has gotten a lot more, because it's the interaction's forced. They have to come out of hiding to some degree in order to do what they're doing.
I will say this, not that I ever needed excuses to be proud of my son, but I mentioned I had been looking up cryptids, and I was like, yeah, I learned about this weird one called the Snallygaster. He was like, oh! He goes running up to his room, comes back with a book, and starts reading to me about the Snallygaster. Like, why do you... How? I've never heard of this in my life. Like, oh,
One,
it's a
I never
dragon-like
heard this in my
creature.
life. Two, who gave you that book?
Right. It's like,
3, nobody can make fun of Harry Potter. Hufflepuff ain't so damn funny when you put it next to a puckwudgie.
yeah, right?
A what?
Exactly.
A puckwudgie.
It's an American goblin.
3 foot tall Native American goblin.
Yeah, it's a full-blown 2 to 3 foot tall gray-skinned frickin' goblin. It's called a
That
puckwudgie.
Resemble a porcupine on its back, which is why you may have seen one, but then when you look back again, it's really not there. Huh.
Right?
Apparently just like hanging out, doing their thing.
Yeah. Between new math and moving heavy furniture for my floors, I think you just broke me. Congratulations. Pugwudgie. Pugwudgie was the thing.
Puckwudgie.
Massachusetts. Of all places, Massachusetts, the home of the puckwudgie. And then, Jersey Devil, Mothman, right? All of those are big cryptids found right in
Well,
where
that's
it is.
but that's the thing is, it's D and I have explored a lot with the Central Park. So to expand on that Central Park lore, because I don't know, it's just I have a special place in my heart for Central Park. Like all my either originated there. That was fun.
This is the most amazing stream ever. The amount of Jack tomfoolery bullshit that's been going on is so freaking amazing.
Oh my God, it's just... Well, if you're gonna do it right, son, do it. So, I mean, yeah, outside of that, and then, you have... I'd really like to see more of the lore. Like, I'm really excited for your campaign, Scott, because it's going to, explore Florida in all its glory in the future.
Yeah, if you think it's bath salt's crazy now, just check it out later.
But by the way, if you need to do research on Florida culture, I highly recommend every novel by Tim Dorsey. Now, Tim Dorsey follows a serial killer in Florida. He is a serial killer who is a Florida-phile. Loves Florida and all its culture. So the book is his series of books are just following the serial killer who likes Rube Goldberg type killing methods.
Oh God!
Well, do you know the fun?
And only goes after people who disrespect Florida culture.
Do you know the fun of Florida Man?
It's a pretty
on your
big pool of
birthday?
victims.
No.
It's a game. You just type into Google Florida Man and then the month and day of your birthday. So
oh my God.
So the top story for mine is Florida man arrested for masturbating with a pickle on private property.
You do what now? You go to Florida Man and then what?
You just type into Google Florida man and then
Your date, your birth date?
Not the year, but you're just month and day.
Month and day. Okay. Not the year.
Well, if you want to find a specific,
And do the top search. Or
yeah,
do
I mean,
or do I take the website that says iFlorida?
So,
Oh, I can't wait to read mine. Out loud, anyway.
I've got Florida man steals alligator from golf course, tries teaching it a lesson by throwing it on the roof of a bar. And then I have Florida man throws pancake batter at a woman who was making dinner. Those are my top 3.
Naked Florida man performs strange dance at McDonald's before trying to have, and wait for it, relationships with a railing. That's the
wow.
number one. This is worse because they have a picture of the guy and it's a ginger with a beard.
Of course it is.
Florida man swallows
Hey, Schroed.
20 rocks of coke and leads cops on a chase from Miami to the Upper Keys.
Jesus Christ.
And I'll do the last one, and then D, it'll be yours. Because if we're going to derail the stream, let's do it Florida Man style.
Let's do it properly.
No,
Schroed,
it's the same guy.
In.
Yep.
Same guy. So let's try this. Oh, wow. Like the top 5 are all Florida Man swallows 20 rocks of crack.
Sounds like a big one. That's like Cocaine Bear, but it's Cocaine Florida Man.
Yeah.
Okay. Florida man with...
Hey, Grilly.
Florida man without arms charged after allegedly stabbing a tourist with his feet.
Yes.
Go on, D.
All right. Well, I mean, my first one's pretty tame compared to all that.
These are all going to be hooks for the South or the Suncoast City Night City sessions.
Well, Florida man throws Christmas tree at wife after being asked to help with dinner. That was the first one. Yeah, I think these are all probably the same. Let's see here. Because I know that the golf course... I have a feeling that Bill read this one out for himself as well. Yep, that one. These ones are so tame. Florida man arrested for biting boys out of frustration. Oh my God. Naked Florida man attacks homeowner during home invasion, deputies say. This dude. Wow.
So, and this just adds to what will be available when folks are playing in Shadows in
Sunshine.
the Suncoast City.
Yeah, Suncoast City.
Or the Space Coast, or any of the other zones down in the South Side Consortium.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a real cool bit of like world expanding. Is we have all of Night City, we've got these territories, just like we have states nowadays. They're just conglomerates of states, and then we have these zones. And Ken was saying in the world building channel that like you could have entire adventures in a zone, or those are like really your hubs where you could just we're going from the metro core to gateway, like
it's like our last campaign was centered in New York, well, the region of New York proper, which we've what do we name that?
Well, you guys were in the New York district.
Central
but it's the Central City hub. Yeah.
So Central City hub is that whole New York metropolitan area. Our last campaign was there. D has actually moved our second campaign down to the Daedalus belt.
Right.
So now we're exploring that. And then now you have like what we're going to do with your campaign is that and the Suncoast.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're through the campaigns exploring and fleshing out these other areas for things.
Yeah, it's just real cool. I like the idea. Yeah. And then in our book, I went through and like I crammed it all into one page, and then I was like, wait a second, why am I trying to fit this all into one page? This is the source book for all this material. Like, this is what people would be looking for to play the game. So let's double that amount. Let's give each one of these territories 2 pages, and then we'll gives folks enough information to get started.
Yeah.
And then they can build out their own stuff. So each one of these territories, I think in the book, should have what the major zones are, and then some I added
a theme and a flavor. I would say theme and a flavor. Sorry to interrupt.
No, absolutely. Theme and a flavor to give you that info.
Yeah, so Suncoast, its theme and flavor is high technology, gambling, Florida man. Right?
Right,
And that's theme and flavor all wrapped up in one. What's the Daedalus belt? Daedalus belt is high industry, massive transit hub,
commercial districts. Yeah,
warehouse hubs.
We've got the, the opportunity to, and we have there's natural industries that are going to exist still, right? There's still going to be logging in 50 years.
Yeah.
Right? Where's all that coming from? Maybe that's coming from the North Quarter, and not that that's an adventure people want to play around of transporting lumber from the North Quarter.
I actually developed one of the characters. If you go into the character development, I have the Cursed. That the character the Cursed. Someone who worked for a corporation in Central City. His family worked in Central City, but we're exploring the Canadian territories, forested regions, where he ran against a skinwalker. Not a skinwalker, actually a Wendigo.
No, it was a skinwalker. It was Nagloshi.
Was it a skinwalker?
Yeah.
It was Nagloshi?
Yeah.
I think it was either Nagloshi or Wendigo.
No, he was Nagloshi.
Okay. So, no, that was the other guy. That was the one we put in the Doom campaign.
Yeah, he was the Nagloshi. Aren't you talking about the same dude?
No, different guy. Cursed. Cursed was fucked around with the Wendigo.
Don't fuck a Wendigo.
So
that's
Wendigo
a bad plan.
In the North Quarter and Skinwalker down in the South Side Consortium, right?
But it doesn't really matter. I mean, Dee and I are going back and forth on characters have been created over a period of I don't want to think about how many years at this point.
It's been a while.
Yeah, but you can have those logging in the Canadian territories and things like that, because all the population went straight to Night City.
Yeah. So
because-
you're talking about like the mass migration east, right?
Mhm.
That the Midwest would be basically emptier.
Yeah, it'd be a lot more vacant, and it would open up these possibilities. Like I said, agriculture would explode in those areas. It'd get really, really big. So like where it's super hyper condensed inside of the Night City territories, everywhere else west of that is going to be extremely open by comparison.
Question:
Mm.
What was the impetus of that move?
What, moving into Night City? Because there was a promise of utopian glamour. That's what fueled everything from... Plus, there was also a requirement for jobs and engineers and all kinds of stuff that was required. So people started shifting and moving from where they were to the Night City territories before they grew into such obscene heights. And then they became the next generation within it. We're basically playing inside of probably the third, almost fourth generation of people in the Night City area because of how fast everything moved.
So would you say that it was a gigantic mass marketing campaign by the corporations?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. They were just basically like, hey, we figured out this really crazy way of manufacturing all these robots. It's going to make life a lot easier. Let's go ahead and see what we can do with this. And they started industrializing these territories as they started buying things up, because what they did is no different than now. They started doing all these real estate deals, and so all of this land, and then massive oligarchies sprung from out of the dirt, kind of like weeds, and then they started filtering through what they wanted to make of it. And so the Central City Hub, that whole territory, is a specific corporate collective that said, yeah, this area is ours, and we're going to match it, make it, mold it, whatever we want it to be. And that's what this is going to be. That's why there's kind of a weird, like, boop, where, I think Massachusetts was where Massachusetts and Connecticut are sitting next to each other, but they belong to two separate territories. So they're kind of...
Yeah, Connecticut.
Yeah.
Flipped to the north border.
Yeah, so... The thing about that is that's why that kind of territorial thing happened, is because the corporations for North Quarter said, hey, we've got some deals and we want to move into that area because you're coastal, you have resources that we want, we've got people that are there, we'd like to make some, and so this was negotiated and moved through. This is kind of what business does now. It buys and sells this territory and starts moving these things around. The states have become this blurred line. Nationalism's out the window because what were states are now considered sectors, and these massive metropolis constructs that just kind of blur the line between what's neighborhood or having two cities blend together or any of that, which is why the redistinction for how it all works from territory being basically a larger state down to something regional being that a zone or, inside of a sector, which is the biggest bordered territory they have.
And I think that's an important distinction that needs to be put in the book, which
is,
I think that was a key point that you said, which is nationalism is gone.
Yeah, it's pretty much dead. There's not really...
And like to kind of emphasize that point, saying nationalism is gone. The concept of nationhood no longer exists in
not for anybody in Night City anyway. Yeah,
in a corporatized world.
Right. Well, I mean, there are still...
In 2033 to 2060, the rise of corporations. That is in our timeline on page 12 of our book.
Yeah, things kind of got bled into. So, like I said, we have solid generations of people that have never known anything else than Night City as it is. Like I said, we're probably close to fourth generation for those that live within that city, having dealt with all this crap. So... it's right.
And I
right
should point out
that
based on our timeline, our alternate timeline, right, for the U.S., it really kicked off in the early '80s. So that's where the divergence happened. It was 40 years ago from where we are presently.
Right, and it's not even that hard to imagine. Yeah, it's not even that hard to imagine. I mean, you look at the way it was between 1920 and 1940, and then right after 1940 to 1960, the acceleration of technological advancement was so fast that it just didn't look like the centuries were identifiable by decade. because of how the tech changed each time the decade rotated around. Now, it's not even decades, it's by year.
I mean, you just think about, like, there's someone, you know, who was alive during, like, from the Civil War to the Man on the Moon. Like, that's 100-year span, basically.
Yeah.
And so, like, just like that, and it gets truncated, right? The chariot was the fastest thing for a very, very long time, and then it was like train, car, plane, like space shuttle, like real you know.
Yeah.
So,
and the bombastic, explosive kind of nature of technological advancement was just robotics this time around, and we had a secondary revolution. We had two industrial revolutions, which is what caused this, because everything up until around the 80s was pretty much the same, and then the 80s hit, and it was like, oh, we're gonna go this direction, and like that, and just went a totally different way.
now, a question for you, and it's something I've been like playing with a little bit, but this is your baby. What, let's say in the early 80s, what was the thing that kicked off essentially this rapid change? Because it was robotics, but like, was it a new element that was discovered, some sort of new, you know, material?
It was
like that.
Well, it was actually a form or discovery that came through, and it wasn't human. It wasn't a human discovery. It was something that humans discovered something else that wasn't us, and we were moving towards that microchip and the rest of it. And we kind of went through and was like, I forget exactly which one of the main corporations discovered it. It was like High Dynamite or not Dark Sun. They were actually somewhat newer. I think it was probably something along the lines of, I don't remember what we changed the name to, but at the time when it was still Shadows, I think it was Miltech that figured it out. But when it was like early Shadows before it being like solidified, I mean, it was that corporation that kind of came across this, and what happened was it created this sort of blueprint for a kind of 3D printing and ease of manufacturing, and it was like basically a paralleled computer technology that went along with it. And so the two things had to advance simultaneously, because the robotics is great, but if you can't program it, that's a problem. And so advancement in programming was really it. They came across the real treasure trove. So the manufacturing was one big hurdle. The second one was they couldn't figure out why, but something that they encountered in cyberspace made it possible for them to more or less, you know, quintuple their programmatic progress. And
so
it
what was
just went nuts.
Treasure trove?
The treasure trove?
I mean, what was the treasure trove specifically? I mean, that's the thing that I'm curious about. What's the specific trigger? The other thing is, can we also consider like an energy revolution? So, you know, the moon, you know, at this point, like in the 80s, could be starting to be harvested for
Xylerium,
helium-3.
Yeah. What did I just see?
What's the big thing? What's the big thing? Helium-3 now?
Lithium.
Yeah, it's a rich. I'm just tired as hell from moving shit all day. But you know what I'm referring to is the fact that there's this big nationalistic claim for mining rights on the moon right now.
They give so here's the thing is that we went roaming around, and this is before I even saw Tron Legacy, which is the part that's kind of weird, but there was just a powerful god seed of data in cyberspace. What we basically encountered was a life form in the digital space, and that life form had, for lack of a better phrasing, the quantifiable DNA structure to make programmatic structures onto itself simplistically. And it took some time, but after putting that through, the computer part of it it threaded that needle so fast that there was no way that we couldn't get around it.
So would we call this the first incursion of the supernatural into
Not even really
the
supernatural.
technological?
Nobody really knows
Or
what
was
it is. Yeah.
So nobody knows what it is. So so what that does is that central concept opens it up for players to
Yeah.
discover that.
Nobody's figured it out. That's the reason why there's so many AI running around inside of the link. That's why the link is so heavily like dense with people that can be inside of it and how we can run so efficiently. And even though we do have those four major link hubs that like Mount Olympus and the Apogee cluster and so on, like all of these areas where they can move and interact, the link was, like I said, the reinforcement here is that you start with the digital aspect, which is how can you program something to interact in the real world. Then you create a body in which it can inhabit, right? So it's actually going in proper linear order at this point, where it's like you can put the mind into the machine then can create the physical manifestation of what it wants, and therefore you can just keep going and going and going and going and going. And so that's what happened, is that we had this extremely like fertile like force of nature in cyberspace that made it possible for us to continue in a way that we never would have before. And it was something that was underneath everything else. It was, for all intents and purposes, this life form was happenstance to encounter. That's it. It was and it is considered a life form. It's the true ghost in the machine. It's taking that concept that started all this stuff with like cyberpunk and the rest of it, where unequivocally it is a living entity in the digital space. And it more or less managed to find a way to propagate itself in a brand new, all-encompassing universe of its own creation. Hence the link.
Okay. Thank you.
So, yeah, it makes you wonder.
And Ken, if you're watching, why aren't you taking notes? I mean,
He's not. Yeah, I was just reading something today about like, new minerals found in a meteorite that just crashed, and they're giving it new names and stuff. And I was thinking, something like that could just easily happen in Night City, like
just accelerate it. You accelerate the healing and mining on the moon. Well, why aren't we going to Titan? And then that goes to Titan, which then explores what's around Titan, because in some Shadows lore from like before the work that we're doing now is you have the Titan prison.
Well,
Schrodinger has a question. How come Night City doesn't have aliens?
It does. That's part of a. That is part of a supplementary element. And as far as the whole Titan prison, you're mixing some game genres up. The Titan prison was that's my Earth Federation campaign. And when human race was capable of going faster than light. But yes, it has aliens. I'm trying to remember what the hell the name of them are, but gargoyles are actually alien. They're not supernatural. They're actually considered to be a stalwart warrior race. They have something where they're actually the reason why orbitally aligned crystal weapons exist, because that is the stepping stone to their what they refer to as their sun weaponry. So they have sun blades that they use, and what it is that they have these incredibly dense, like orbitally aligned crystalline structures that they can forge into weapons, and then power a crap load of energy through, so that the blade becomes white freaking hot and more or less becomes a variation of a lightsaber. But it's actually solid material, and the way that it dispenses the heat allows the structure to remain solid and perfectly dense without losing cohesion. And but at the same time, it is massively. It's what do you want to call it? It's superconductive, so it pushes all of that exothermic force and energy out without causing any internal damage. So the weapon has mass, balance, and capacity, but can basically cut through a thick piece of steel with no trouble.
Yeah. Thank you, Shroud.
That's what she said. But yeah, they're one of several possible alien races that have been there. One of whenever I did my beta test with my buddy in Texas, I actually used I was surprised I was actually able to complete the full arc, but I used a race that's actually from Earth Federation as a campaign that runs another parallel version of Earth. But the enemy that arrived in Night City was a Zithix, and he was the kind of enemy force that is considered to be an extinction level event. They managed to actually stop that from happening.
So beyond, so the one of the questions I've had about Night City in general is like, what's going on in Japan? What's going on in, Australia? Like all that. Are they similarly advancing?
Japan, because if you know anything about them now, they're gonna hold fast to what they're doing already. Like their anal retentiveness is still going to be there. There's going to be pretty much a heavy amount of xenophobic kind of reactions. It's going to be loosened up, but industrialization is going to have definitely peaked a lot higher. They're going to push the envelope on that front. But they also have heavily focused on things like vehicles, robotics, and because they've taken that same tech that we started with, and they kind of went at it in a slightly different way. They did industrialize, but they didn't do it so heavily. They don't have the room, the population, or the material capacity to be able to pull that off. But have they made things a shitload more efficient? Yeah, they've made it a lot more efficient. It's way streamlined.
I'd imagine there'd be corporations that would have a presence just like they do now.
Yeah, Bushido Defense Works is housed out of Japan.
So how would we consider the reconstitution of Europe?
Oh, well, that's probably kind of the same sort of a mess as we are in terms of, like, they're going to be big, clunky kinds of industrialized pockets. But again, they don't have the same level of resources. The reason why, so you take into account, like everywhere else, the U.S. has this perfect capacity to do the Night City thing because the weather is temperate, the amount of agricultural space is also great. There's a lot of that there, so there's plenty of room. There is the sheer fact that we have a multitude of inborn resources with our territory established such as it is, and we don't have to worry about powers that be north or south being stronger than us, even in this sense. And because we have such a higher probability of encountering this thing in the first place, we were one of several, but you can't get the same kind of thing in Russia. I mean, you could probably do pretty well with that, but, the robotics would help. But Russia is not in a condition, even probably especially because of where it's placed, climate-wise. It'd be hard as shit to make all that work without serious maintenance requirements. And it's not like that project wouldn't require maintenance in general from the U.S., but we can feed on ourselves as a nation, despite the fact that nationalism's kind of out the window. The corporations control that. So the corporations are responsible for reinforcing all of the original borders because you have the government working its way as a figurehead, more or less a corpse puppet that the corporations are moving around and having do its thing like normal, but it's really the corporations that have taken the lead on this. Now, not everywhere is going to be like that. Like again, Japan, highly efficient. Russia, even more structurally sound than what they've been before in the past. The UK and all that melting pot of countries and cultures. That's hard to know for me in general. I haven't really given it a terrible lot of thought about what's going on over there. I just know that there's going to be equal levels of technology and there will be equal levels of espionage, but probably at a ratio that's somewhere around like 25 to maybe even 30% worse than in the US. Just because we're talking about countries as well as corporations, as well as multiple we're talking about like scaling up tribalism and making it even worse. So those areas are going to be even more crazy because there wasn't really a chance for even a Brexit to occur. Things are just separated.
Okay. And what about because at this point I'm just kind of thinking about supplementary materials.
Yeah.
What about the kaiju?
What about the kaiju?
What about the kaiju? Where are the kaiju?
Well, I mean that it kind of expands as to wherein lies the the development in India and in China and in Africa, and just kind of how do these things play into this development of corpocracy?
Yeah.
And the utilization of natural resources, because for me, from my perspective, is the fact that I would see, this is my own concept and my own thing, is Africa in itself becoming almost a Wakandan-like entity because they finally realize their potential and the raw resources
you need
that
space.
They have.
Yeah.
Right. And then the raw resources that they have available, that in many respects is equal to the raw resources that are available within the Northern American territories, if not more so.
Well, there's, like I said, there is that as well. Like I said, Africa is one of those places where it's like, but you have to get past like whatever it is, because even now the problem that that Africa has always seemed to have, similar to like the Middle East, is that conflict is a huge issue. I mean, like, money, believe it or not, money is what brought everyone together for the whole Night City thing to work. It was money that unified everybody.
Gold rush, right? It's
Yeah.
not gold.
Yeah. It was more it was more like the chrome rush is what it was. Is that
Right.
Yeah, we were rushing into this sort of utopian chromatic future, wanting everything to be shiny and new, so that we can enter the halls of Valhalla. Anyway,
So then we can take that by extension and create we can create something like that in supplementary materials, which is, you want to expand this, you can take this formula within Night City and how the corporations arose here, and then plant that culturally.
and it just kind of depends.
With your own cultural understanding of those various nation states.
I mean, you could
use Night City as a template, and then apply it outwards.
Yeah, I mean, like for in this case, like the where I'm going to be focused in for a lot of this, when it comes to the shadows in general, is that I'm going to leave a lot of stuff open. I'm mostly familiar with here, so I'm just going to be like, this is kind of where I'm sticking it in because it makes the most sense. It has nothing to do with anything else other than familiarity. It's like, I understand how Americans work in the most general sense, and I could see how things would transform. I know jack diddly squat about how the Canadians do their thing, or the Mexicans, or anything else like that. I don't know anything about them because I'm so focused here. But what would be great, because I'm thinking about this in the sense that what you just sort of mentioned, which is, if you want to take this and run with it and do supplementals and stuff like that, just kind of like how like D&D's got their open gaming license and stuff like that. It's like, if you wanted to make a source book that was entirely outside the norm, that was supplementary to all of this, I would welcome that with open arms. That'd be fantastic. You've got something you want to push through and make, basically, do something where it's like South Africa and see exactly how that pans out in the circumstances, because yeesh. I mean, think about District 9. Like, I kind of imagine that there's some crap going down similar to that.
I mean, aliens aside, yes, that's what South Africa looked like.
Yeah. Well, I'm just talking about, like, that's not just, it's not necessarily aliens, but it would be other kind of, I would say, mirror reflections of that kind of principle, where it would maybe it was cybernetics and something else. Like, you could stretch that to encompass just about any kind of theme or concept you'd want, and it would work. And it's like, and I would like to leave that open. I think that mentally, my home, when it comes down to it, and like I said, for the most part, everywhere else in the world has reached sort of pseudo-comprehensible levels to what Night City's accomplished. But because, it's, in other words, it's not so much a good thing that Night City exists, because, like I said, the level of greed required to create what they did is pretty stupendous.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. So it's more of a just sort of like, it's a good thing that the rest of the world didn't follow suit on that one. But it's more interesting to me in that sense to be in that placement. But I mean, generally speaking, the world's in a comparable place. A lot of the U.S. has been sort of drained of its population, but it has done nothing less for the policing of it.
The only reason I mentioned that is because on my Netflix that I'm starting to watch, and I hate to be that guy. It's actually
be that guy, Bill. It's all right.
It's really fucking good. Excuse my language,
oh.
But it's African. It's on Netflix. It's called African Folktales Reimagined.
Mm-hmm.
And it really kind of explores this almost supernatural element. I'm just like, that's it. That's Night City.
I mean, American Gods, right?
Like American Gods.
Take American Gods, toss that 50 years into the future, where you have these new gods arising, right? The old ones are cycling out because they don't have quite the same followers, and you have these new ones arising. Or are they new? Did they just rebrand themselves? Like there's, I think what I like about it is, just as you said, like with D&D books, not even the open gaming license level, but like the stuff that's been officially released, where they've said, here's a campaign setting, and instead, like the Sword Coast of Forgotten Realms has had 1 billion things written about it, and that's where the new movie is set, and like it's got 1 billion games and all that stuff, which essentially is like the Night City of that universe. It is one strip on the west coast of one continent, and there are multiple other continents. There's a whole other Fey realm, all of these other things.
So we take the template. Yeah, we take the template of Night City and say, hey, why can't you throw that into China or India or Australia, like the major continents, or into Africa?
And have those those corporations exist. They may not have they may not be headquartered here,
or your own corporations,
but
right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What corporations can you design from those cultures, and how would they reflect the culture itself?
Well, and there's so many opportunities for what about the group that doesn't embrace, like you were saying, right? The folks that are gonna eschew the corporatizing and the big city life, and they're gonna retreat further into the Badlands, right?
Yeah.
And you end up creating. Do we have a Mad Max type scenario where the people are scarce, the resources are scarce because all of that got sucked into Night City, but now it's also the Wild West again.
Well, I mean, if you want to talk about a Mad Max principal possibility, think about the states like New Mexico and Nevada and anywhere else that's kind of deserted out there that just doesn't have a lot, and losing that, especially since it's not going to be really prime agricultural land, that's going to go into disrepair, and it will start to screw up.
Yeah, I mean, Nevada as it is consists of Reno and Vegas.
Yeah.
Right? So...
Yeah, sorry, D. We went down a little bit of a squirrel trail on that one, but I think that's something that we can emphasize in the CRB though, which is, hey, we are utilizing Night City as a template. We want you to expand it through, like in the DM creation, like in the DM section. We want you to utilize Night City and expand upon this corptocracy, this development within corporations as an absolute control of the world. How is that reflected culturally within your own understanding of various former nation states around the world?
Yeah, here's the level of technology that's available. All of these different, archetypes can still exist.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're you're set in, Mexico City, which is an extremely populated, gigantic city.
Or you're located in Cape Town.
Or you're in Cape Town, a coastal city that is, had a new group in charge every 50 years for the last 400 years. Like, what does that look like? Yeah.
And
like,
what does that look like with corporations? How do the corporations deal with a 50-year change every 50 years?
Right.
How are they compensated for that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Or you get Japan, where you maybe have a corporation that has existed for hundreds of years.
Well, there's going to be a few of those. Like I said, High Dynamit's probably a long-winded one. The Bushido Defense Works, Dark Sun, Neurodyne Industries, those ones are all fairly new. But there are going to be other really strong, like, eldritch corporations, for lack of better terminology. There's going to be those.
Oh, I actually like that.
And what's driving
that? I think that's actually a great term. Eldritch corporations.
I like that. Did your light just fall again?
Yep.
Like, I mean, Disney just hit 100 years old, right?
Yeah, so
Nintendo past 100 years.
They're eldritch, especially how they treat things. But anyway,
so yeah, I mean, there definitely is some really cool possibility. God, I like that Eldritch Corporation. There's some cool possibilities. And then, how has this corporation stayed successful for so long? And you notice how the CEO just doesn't seem to change as much? Maybe.
Yeah.
Or that he always seems to. Oh wait, it's the show I introduced you to, Ragnarok.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where like the giants. So
Yeah.
Ragnarok is a beautiful show. That basically is a retelling of Ragnarok with Thor and everything else, but the giants own a corporation, and they basically go through this cycle where two of the giants act as the parents, two of the giants act as the children take the corporation, they age, and then the older giants sacrifice some bullshit and then become the children, and it's this cycle that flows between the two, and I absolutely love that concept. So you could have these like older beings that are just like, they always look the same, like Nicolas Cage throughout the ages.
There's what was it then? The Eternals.
Yeah.
Right? He was like, oh yeah, I'm the 5th generation of myself. How come nobody's noticed that you haven't aged? Oh no, I'm my own great grandson. Just keep being in the movies. Add a little touch of gray to my hair, disappear. 5 years later, my kid takes the reins again, and there's some really cool possibility.
Yeah. There's a lot of way to manufacture it.
I think Drew was watching for a brief second.
A
wild Drew, yeah, I was just going to say.
Okay, so GameCat, you're saying a Japanese culture that has regressed to the way of the samurai, but with tech. Yes, a street samurai is a very cool cyberpunk trope. I was just watching Ghost Dog the other day.
I love that movie. Hey, I found that in my collection.
Isn't that played by Ice Cube, and he's like some samurai Bushido?
Forrest Whitaker, man.
Ghost Dog.
I was watching Andor, and Saw Gerrera pops up, and I'm like, Forrest Whitaker, dang it! Now I gotta go watch Ghost Dog.
Isn't that where he's like some kind of an assassin, and he does very deliberate killing? I can't remember.
Follows the path of Bushido. Like to the T. To the point where he sacrifices himself for his master.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it, so I'll have to check it out. I think I saw one part when he actually executes a single person, but he was very deliberate about it, and it was just kind of like, and he was talking about these elements of Bushido, and I remember that, but then I don't remember anything else. So either I stopped watching it or something else happened.
Yeah.
Okay, so GameCat this is fun. Q&A with GameCat. He said,
Clerics.
where are the religious zealots in Nice City? Well, we have the clerics was one group.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go into like the Daedalus. Well, not the Daedalus belt. Let's go with the Sun Coast. You go in the Sun Coast, you could have something called the Preachers.
Yeah, I mean,
Well-
the religion has changed a bit with those who know a bit more about what's going on in the world. Like, you can talk about vampires and demons and angels all day long, and then when actually shows up, like that gets
Oh, that'd be me.
terrifying.
Oh, absolutely. We watched Johnny Mnemonic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see that over there? That's where I'm supposed to be. Not here with the garbage. He's like,
And that is
with the
another
garbage
prophetic
and last
movie.
week's newspapers floating back and forth. I want room service. Like, it's one of the best rants. Yeah, I'm supposed to be with a $10,000 a night hooker and a cold Mexican beer. Like,
Yeah,
Oh, the Preacher dude. Yeah.
yeah,
Dolph Lundgren.
yeah. Well,
Priest.
he was the I think you could call him the street priest or street preacher, something like that.
Electro Priest.
Either way, there are fanatics there, but the thing about that is that the church hasn't gone away. It's still in the threads of the society. It's just not, like if you're gonna fanatics in this case that are like that are going to be the one group called the clerics who take it to the nth degree. They are zealots and Knights Templar out the booty. They take what the hunters were trying to do and went way overboard, and now they are just extremely xenophobic, dangerous people.
They just have real life examples now of what they can be
Right, yeah.
xenophobic against.
Yeah.
And then
Malcolm's
you have
character, I mean, Bill's character, Malcolm, is Catholic.
Yeah, and he's more along the lines of the Church of the True Cross. So the Church of the True Cross has those. It's more of a medium range of involvement in the supernatural. Like they have their armed forces. They're Templars. One of my first characters was one of those, which was interesting. I need to dig him up somewhere.
Wasn't he the one that
but
was
then,
guardian to an old relic and got poured into Night City?
Different one. He was actually.
There's so many.
So
I've got a list, so they're somewhere in there. So I got a nut job in there somewhere. But you've got the Church of the True Cross, which is more of that kind of supernatural militant arm of the Catholic Church, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have the clerics, which are the fanatics.
True fanatics, really.
The true fanatics, and then you just have the church. So you kind of have these three elements. Here's the church. Church contracts these guys. They contracted these guys, but these guys went off the deep end.
Right.
I mean, we have true faith as an advantage, right? Which, in a way, is a form of extreme belief to the point of causing pain to those who are not aligned with you.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What was that Opus Dei? Yeah, the clerics make, Catholic members of Opus Dei. It makes them look like they're sane and well put together. Like it's no fucking problems here. Just don't cross them or curse. You get a claymore in your Thanksgiving turkey.
Cool little belt for your leg. Yeah, so there's a lot. It's a rich world, but definitely
It is.
I think that so what I'm working on right now, and then is fleshing out these territories, because those will be included in the CRB. Basically, the United States will be included, right? The territories of Night City, and then kind of the beyond Night City mentions there, and then outside of that we have like Neverlands, right? So that's a whole geographic area that is outside of
there's
normal reality.
There's
Yeah.
a significant vibrational
And then we have the
discord
market.
between-
Sorry, my audiobook kicked off because I accidentally touched my earpiece. This is going to be such a cool stream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have all these little pocket dimensions and Neverlands and things like that.
I think ultimately when we take a look at the Regent's Night City, as long as we focus on the general theme of corptocracy, and then sub themes of what is the theme and flavor of that region, and then that ultimately will just allow for really rich environments.
Oh, well, they're all sunk there, Strode. Just like you think they are. Sunk and migrated. As a matter of fact, Atlantis was utterly destroyed. So.
But, feel free to write that adventure where
Right.
you contract a charter company off of the Suncoast City in Florida and, head toward the Bermuda Triangle. Like, who knows?
Realize that it's a corporate Atlantis.
Right?
Because
Yeah.
They developed it.
Well, so another adventure that would be very good, and I kid you not, this is actually entirely because I watched Gargoyles as a kid. Whenever I started adding this, the reason why the Lost Ones are the Lost Ones is because Avalon's disappeared and they don't know how to get back.
Yeah.
So a lot of the Fae, like elves and things like that, don't know how to get back home. So they're referred to as the Lost Ones, and they're scattered throughout the world as a result.
There's a lot of potential.
Yeah, there's so much, and there's no way I'm going to be able to incorporate everything. But we're going to be able to get a lot. I mean, these supplemental books with these archetypes are going to start causing. We're going to get answers to some questions and a lot more questions.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like it's all in the field here. The core rule book and getting that set up and going and balanced in a way that makes sense. Which
Well, you and I have had those conversations with lore,
mhm.
right? Where it's like, I'll expand on this lore, and like, yeah, that goes to the supplemental bill.
Right.
It's just
So for reference, the book right now is 189 pages cover to cover.
189 pages right now.
Yeah.
Jesus.
That's with some placeholder stuff, so it will get longer.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty freaking good, though. I never figured I would ever get around to 20. Whenever I was thinking about it on my own, I was like, I'm never going to get around to this. I want to get to 10
We have,
pages in
20
and it's
pages
done.
just on vampire powers.
That was my fault. Sorry. I kind of went a little bonkers on that one.
Yeah, no problem.
I also need to improve. There are some things, speaking of which, just nagging things that are in the back of my mind about this. I definitely need to rebalance out the werewolves, and they need to have a bit more. Like I figured, they need to have a little bit more power. They need some more powers in general. They've got some, but I want to spread that out a little bit. There's not nearly enough.
Yeah.
Because their physical ferocity was what I focused on, but I need to tamper that down just a little bit because street level werewolves are insane.
You think? Because I think we figured that out with
It's
Shroud's
a
character.
prestige class. We're just gonna have to introduce those. Only available at heroic and beyond.
Well, that's it. What's terrible is that werewolves are freaking gnarly. They're supposed to be. But I have to basically the one thing that's because they're so physical. The main things that I'm probably going to remove from them, especially at street level, is going to be that natural armor is probably going to be non-existent at street level. You either have to get it as an advantage, and you were talking, Scott, about having a rank-specific restriction, and I was like, there is one already. In my head, I started thinking about it, because there's a max rank for, skills and stuff like that, but max power rank. We just need to have the max rank equivalent for, character creation when doing advantages, and just say
so right
it
now
have
the
be 1,
street
2,
level
3, whatever.
max
Well,
Yeah.
power
you already have within the werewolf powers something that focuses on natural armor.
Right, which is why I'm saying that what I'm going to have to do in order to balance this out is that street level will have no natural armor. They're too young. The idea is they're going to be too green, right, or underdeveloped.
Maybe that's just a milestone.
Right, the milestone could be something along those lines, exactamundo. Yeah, so some things have to be kind of rearranged and reorganized. It's not really a big deal. It's just that whenever I started playing around with this, Jesus Christ, these werewolves can literally just walk through everything. And You know, the other thing too is that I have to address damage and how it operates, because bullets do, so much a piece, and if you hit above what that is, they have to have armor piercing, which is fine. That's perfect. And I have to make sure. But if you're dealing, as an example, if you shoot a werewolf with a desert eagle, or just like go crazy and do like a 500 mag. A 500 Magnum revolver, which is enormous in terms of a round. It's just huge. This thing would probably do at least 13, 14 damage out the gate, right? And you can have a revolver with a 500 mag cylinder in it that carries like 5 and 6 shots, I think. That's nuts. That cylinder is enormous, man. The gun weighs more than your own head. It's such a huge gun. Even with light armor, it would just throttle you, right? But the thing about that is that light armor sits anywhere between 10 to 15, so it's almost hitting that outright. But you'd be still suffering serious damage underneath all of that, because it would hit like a truck. And then, plus soft armors wouldn't do jack diddly squat, which is the other thing too. It's like, I'm trying to figure out what the best collaboration between soft and hard armors are, and all the rest of that stuff, because I've come to realize that that's actually almost more important than whether or not it can push off energy and the rest of it. But it's a complicated system to work with, and something that I want to try and make work. But you take a 500 mag, you fire it at a werewolf, and if they have like what Schrodinger Game Cat's werewolf has, they soak it. They just
stick.
Yeah, they just get a couple of bruises for half a second, and that's about it.
But
and
you hit them with that sparkle grenade.
Yeah, that's a problem. Yep, they start suffering withering damage and all the rest of that stuff. Yeah, they have a vulnerability. So they qualify as something that Palladium would call a mega hero, where they basically are almost unstoppable, except for when they are encountering whatever their kryptonite is. So it's...
But that's weak. That's weak balancing, right? To just introduce then okay, but you've got Superman running around, but everybody has kryptonite bullets. Like, okay, well,
I think stripping the natural armor would be
I
a good
agree.
choice,
Yeah.
and then making it integrate it specifically within that, maybe beefing up the milestone itself.
Yeah, that could be
that
another
exists.
another element too. And like I said, it'll take some reorganization and some stuff like that. But it's completely doable. But the werewolf right now is just cracked out of its mind with how powerful it is. It's full blown. It's just like, oh yeah, sure. You want to run around with a whole party full of Wolverines? Go for it. Like,
Hey, look, Strode and I are perfectly happy with the way werewolves are now. You
It's
don't
I'm
have to-
certain
you
of
don't-
that.
You don't have to change them. It's fine. It's fine. Because we're enjoying our current campaign life. No,
Yeah.
but I honestly think that what Scott was saying was the fact that focusing werewolves' natural armor boosting in the milestones, and then what that does is, if you want that beefy werewolf in the beginning, then you need to focus on your advantages.
Right. Well, and the other thing
Disadvantage.
too is that there's a very important. The system can't be broken, right? But if you want to start at street level, we're talking about the power levels are there for one purpose. Period. What sort of gaming experience are you looking for? Are you looking for something strategic, risky, and gritty, or are you looking for the high octane, heavy action super brawl? What are you looking for, right? And so if it doesn't align with the structure of the experience you're trying to convey, that's the only thing that's got to get worked over. So, if we say street level werewolf, that is totally possible. It means that they should be just as nervous about getting into any gunfight as anybody else who's sitting at that power level, but for very specific reasons. Despite the fact that they have regeneration and the rest of it, I mean, if you get hit with 30 bullets and you're not wearing enough armor, or if things penetrate through it, you're going to be down. You won't.
Or you didn't take that advantage of thick skin.
Right, well that helps too, and we're also going to be dropping the thick skin benefit as well, for going from 2 to 1. Like, that's getting dropped also. Like I said, what it seems to be king in Shadows, now that it's being completely pushed together mechanically is that, you know, damage is not necessarily the big killer per se. It actually happens to be whose defense is best. So armor is where it's at. If you can soak the damage, stop the damage, dodge the damage, you're the one who wins. Because eventually you will do more than your opponent, but you have to be able to absorb or avoid what that damage is being thrown at you, because the second you start taking any damage, your pain penalties will screw you over. It just gets to be horrifyingly nasty. And there was a part of me that actually was wondering if pain penalties shouldn't be reworked at least to some degree to where it's like bigger blocks instead of just being one per, to where it's just like 3 health levels at 1, 3 health levels at 2, and 3 health levels at 3, and basically take those penalties and reduce them down. But, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, or if you want to play it hard mode, like what it is set now, like you could do that too. But I haven't decided fully on that yet. I want to keep playing it to see how it feels, because Shadows is dangerous as hell, and it should feel that way.
Well, the last time we played Harad,
yeah,
that was brutal.
Yeah, the tables flipped on you almost immediately.
Oh, it was. I mean, it was vicious how bad that was with the pain penalties.
Yeah, that's because
it just destroyed every roll.
Yeah, that's because you haven't been hit with any silver yet, Schrodinger. If anybody figures out what that is, or if you get somebody who's aware of what you are, or you get exposed to silver, you are going to be a hurting unit. It will go right through you like wet tissue paper.
Yeah, because trust me, what we're referring to is in the Rod campaign, Arad dealt with a vampire who could deal withering damage, and yeah,
he was using the ability called Ghost Fire.
Yeah, he was utilizing Ghost Fire, and that caused massive withering damage. So I was dealing with like -6 to my rolls.
Yikes!
Even though I had healed up to a certain point, I still had that withering damage, which affected my rolls. And this vampire, because of that ability, tore my character apart. Yeah. Like outright.
I'm aware that you can deal withering damage there, Schrodinger. Yes. That means you can fight other supernaturals with the same intent, but they can do it to you.
And trust me, it, just like that example, it is brutal, and you feel it, which is why I like pain penalties. I love pain penalties because it makes sense to me overall.
Right. But yeah, if we dial them back a little, then maybe, you know, that's why we playtest this stuff. Nobody's really had to deal with more than a couple levels of pain penalties because they die. Like they, right? Like
that's so true.
It's that you like Danny has like 20 hit points, so if something hits him for like 25 damage, like he's just dead. Yeah. If something hits him for 10 damage, he's dealing with, you know, two levels of pain penalties. So yeah, it's, you know, unless you have someone who's got like a bot of like 9 or something like that, where they've got all those hitboxes and they're taking low levels of damage, then that pain will really, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's why that advantage of like pain tolerance is super helpful. Because you can fight through that. It makes it very, 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 very important to have that. And I want to sort of, again, in the way of balancing, pain tolerance as an advantage should be pretty freaking expensive. Because even in real life, if you see anybody who can just tolerate pain, it's usually startling because most of us can't.
Every time I like stub my toe or something and it just like wrecks, you know, the next hour of my life, I think like, okay, but like some big like burly like, you know, athlete or something like that, like, are they the same? Like this guy who's like smashing, you know, his body into another dude at the, you know, playing football or rugby or something like that. Like, are they the same? They stub their toe and it hurts and they're like all dumb, like for an hour and it wrecks their morning? Yeah, probably. Like, you know, they might be able to last longer.
I old man leave myself like 3 days ago.
Right?
Still hurts.
I
I was walking down the stairs.
oh yeah. I messed up
Yeah.
my Achilles doing a skip it. You know that like thing you
Like
around your ankle?
Yes.
So the kids had never seen it before. I put it on, I'm like, I know how to do this thing. I used to do this all the time when I was a kid. And I'm going and I'm like, yeah, I'm up to like 30. And, you know, Kim goes, hey, don't forget you're in your 40s now. And I'm like, I'm fine. Yeah, so for the last week and a half, I've had to spend like 5 minutes stretching out my Achilles to get out of bed and make it like down the stairs.
You know what the worst thing I've ever done is that I was with my friend Mike who'd been out of the Army for a while, and he's like, hey man, let's get into shape. We're going to start doing some regular walks and PT. I'm like, cool, let's do it. And this was like close to 10 years ago, something like that. So I'm younger than I am now, but we went out and did our walked for like 2 miles, and then, you know, halfway through the walk though, we did like really good lunges. The day of, no problem. Following week and a half was probably the most miserable I had ever had to deal with. My quads did not work. And I mean that if I tried to bend over, I would collapse because I couldn't hold myself up. If I sat into a chair, I'd go probably 25 degrees, and then the rest of it was just free fall because I couldn't suspend myself.
You got withering damage.
Yeah.
Yeah. So somehow we just went on to the old man rant about getting injuries.
Hey, it happens.
Right.
Definitely. Well, we're kind of at the approaching the top of the hour here, so I think we're probably at a good point since now my screen isn't skipping around and my face isn't enlarging and suddenly exploding and doing all kinds of other crazy stuff. We'll probably hold it right here. I think this was a good discussion overall. We got through a lot of like discussions about lore and the rest of it, plus some other things that I've been meaning to discuss. But yeah, that worked out nicely. I appreciate you gentlemen coming along for the ride here.
Absolutely.
Jenks, you owe me Coke.
Oh man, yeah. Thanks for showing up, Schrodinger. I appreciate it. Especially all the discussion was very, very helpful. It worked. Now I'm gonna have to fix my light and a whole bunch of other stuff.
Episode, but this was it.
Yeah. Well, we got ourselves another set for Fiction Factory and the rest of it. So this will work out quite nicely. On that note, I bid thee all good night. See thee later.
Take care.